forward. A Biden staffer told the authors that Biden just had to win and then he could disappear for 4 years. That's all they needed to do. And, you know, it is, the following statement was, he'd only have to show proof of life every once in a while. And as I had a Tennessean say to me, when they had actually downloaded this book and read it, and
now I think we're all seeing why.
Thank you. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm so pleased. I joined my colleague from Florida in saying it is time that we have this hearing. All across Tennessee, I hear from people every single week that say, what was really going on in the White House, and why would no one say anything when, with your very own eyes, you could look at any of the footage and see what was transpiring with President Biden. And I think the fact that many of his own cabinet members knew that he was not fit to serve and that there was a cabal behind the curtain who was making all the decisions, it is so offensive to the American people. And it's not something that is a partisan issue. As I talk with Democrats, many of them have lost faith in what they thought was going to be a very moderate Joe Biden administration, and it turned into be the far left Bernie Sanders version of the Democrat Party that was using the auto pen and making decisions and committing our great nation to policies that the American people did not support and would never have supported. And I fully believe that because of that overreach and that flippant attitude that much of his staff had toward the policies of this nation, to people in the administration that chuckled about tossing gold bars off the Titanic. They knew they were going down. They knew they were going to be found out, and they probably knew at some point there would be a hearing like today, and the other side of the dais would be completely empty because no one can defend what they did. Mr. Wold, I want to come to you for a moment and talk about something that was really a disturbing revelation from the Thompson book. And you know, this is part of the thing. Now we're finding out the media was all a part of the joke. They were part of the ruse. They were part of the fraud that was pushed forward. A Biden staffer told the authors that Biden just had to win and then he could disappear for 4 years. That's all they needed to do. And, you know, it is, the following statement was, he'd only have to show proof of life every once in a while. And as I had a Tennessean say to me, when they had actually downloaded this book and read it, and then they said, you know, how stupid do they think we are? And the disrespect this administration showed to the American people. Why is it that the American people appreciate that President Trump goes out and nearly every day is taking questions and answering questions? It's because they have now found out that these staffers were willing to do undemocratic things, using their term, to keep the president in office, to keep Biden there. They were willing to do undemocratic things, unlawful things. So, Mr. Wold, let's talk about that behavior and how that undermines the faith of Tennesseans and all Americans in our public institutions, because they could see what was happening, but they were being lied to by people in the White House who were probably then running in their office and saying, well, we pulled it off another day.
Yeah, Senator, I mean, this is a theme you've talked about for many years, which is the executive branch is enormous. I mean, there are close to 1,000 employees in the executive office of the president. There are nearly 4 million full-time federal employees throughout the 14 departments that the president oversees. Executive power, as accountable to the people of this country, really manifests in 2 ways. The power of the president to remove bureaucrats and to fire them, and to affix his signature to official actions that he undertakes. So when the Washington establishment says something to the effect of, well, democracy dies in darkness, yes, It does when there are staffers, the media, cabinet officials, senior advisors to the president who all create a covering sort of a shroud of darkness that obscures who is actually making the decisions. And one other thing I'll just say very quickly, a number of your colleagues on the Democrat side have said, well, there's an OLC opinion here. We don't need to talk anymore. There's an OLC opinion. It says you can use the auto pen. The opening paragraph of that OLC opinion says you can use the auto pen, but only when the president directs that you do so under his decision-making power, right? It is very clear again and again that the president actually has to make the decision. That cannot be delegated to a staffer or an advisor. And there's no indication here that anyone other than staff were making these decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all the witnesses for being here. You know, the visual, sometimes it really is true. A picture speaks louder than words. It's worth 1,000 words. And here, all you have to do is...
In the final moments of this hearing, it was Senator Marsha Blackburn's voice, sharp, unwavering, and laden with accusation, that cut through the chamber's stale air. Her words hung there like a flare, illuminating a claim drawn from the Thompson book. That a Biden staffer allegedly said the quiet part out loud, that the only goal in 2024 was to just win, and then the president could disappear for 4 years, surfacing only to show proof of life every once in a while. It was a moment steeped in tension, the kind that forces the room itself to hold its breath. A moment that said far more about the state of American governance than perhaps anyone wished to admit. Because what Blackburn put on display wasn't simply a partisan jab or a dramatic flourish. It was a window, a stark, unsettling glimpse into the machinery behind the executive branch, a reminder that democracy can be weakened not only by what leaders do, but by what they fail to do, and by those who quietly move the levers in their place. She described what millions of voters had sensed but couldn't articulate, that something felt off, that something didn't add up, that decisions were being made by unseen hands while the nation searched for answers that never came. As she spoke, you could feel the gravity of her words pulling at the edges of the hearing room. She referenced Tennesseans reading the book, shaking their heads in disbelief, asking, "How stupid do they think we are?" That question, raw, unfiltered, piercing, cut deeper than any statistic or talking point. It was the voice of a public that felt dismissed, misled, and shut out. A public that sensed its trust had been treated like a disposable resource. And then came the contrast she laid bare. One president who regularly stepped before cameras, answering questions nearly every day, and another whom staff allegedly believed could be hidden from public view, propped up, shielded, protected, all while decisions were made in his name. Whether one agrees with Blackburn or not, the underlying concern she articulated is one that transcends ideology. Who governs the United States when the elected leader is unseen? Who signs? Who directs? Who decides? Mr. W., sitting before the committee, answered in a way that cut through the noise. The executive branch, he reminded the chamber, is vast. Nearly 1,000 employees in the executive office alone, 4 million across federal agencies, and power that manifests only through two things: the president's ability to fire and the president's authority to sign. Everything else, every whispering advisor, every staffer operating in the shadows, every layer of bureaucracy, hinges on those 2 points of accountability. And accountability, he warned, dies when darkness settles over the decision-making process. He spoke of the auto pen, a mundane tool, almost laughably simple, yet suddenly transformed into the story's smoking gun. The law permits its use, he noted, but only when the president himself directs it, only when the decision is his. But the allegations described today suggested something different. signatures without direction, actions without the leader's voice behind them, decisions made by unnamed staffers whose power grew precisely because no one was looking. What Blackburn exposed, intentionally or not, was the fragility of trust in American institutions. Not trust in one man, not trust in one administration, but trust in the idea that the Oval Office remains firmly tethered to the will of the people. When staffers joke about tossing gold bars off the Titanic, as she put it, when they chuckle about pulling off another day undetected, it becomes more than misconduct. It becomes a moral indictment. And moral indictments don't fade easily, because this hearing wasn't just about one administration. It wasn't just about one set of staffers, one set of decisions, one controversial book. It was about the architecture of American power, the scaffolding that holds up the presidency itself. It was about transparency and whether it's being used as a shield or a window. It was about the invisible line between governance and manipulation and how easily that line blurs when the public's right to know is treated as an obstacle rather than a foundation. As the senator's words echoed across the dais, the empty seats across from her felt symbolic. A physical reminder of the silence, she said, had defined this entire chapter. A silence from those she accused of knowing the truth and choosing to hide it. A silence from those who should have spoken earlier, louder, more courageously. A silence that now demands answers. And in these final minutes, as the hearing drew toward its close, the chamber felt less like a political battleground and more like a confession chamber, a place where uncomfortable truths finally surfaced, where the veneer of orderly governance cracked just enough for the public to glimpse what lay beneath. Whether one agrees with Senator Blackburn or not, the moment mattered. It mattered because it forced the question. What does leadership mean when the leader's presence becomes optional? What does democracy become when its stewards operate behind a curtain? And what does accountability look like when those entrusted with power tell the public, through their actions, if not their words, that transparency is no longer required? These questions will linger long after the gavel falls. They will shape debates, shape elections, shape the ongoing struggle over who truly wields power in America. And as this chapter closes, one truth remains unshakable. Democracy does not survive in shadows. It survives only when the people, all people, demand light. Thank you for watching. And if you believe in holding power accountable, if you believe in truth over silence, and if you believe the American people deserve to see what happens behind the curtain, subscribe to Liberal Line and support our work to expose the truth.